homeownership group today to discuss down payment assistance through our HOPE program. As you can see from on the screen today, it's just a few housekeeping measures. I'm not going to read all of those to you, but most importantly, just make sure you're muted when you're not speaking. So if you're, needing to talk to children, animals, partners, spouses, you can have those conversations and we can continue with our meeting. That would be greatly appreciated. For those of you who I have not met, I'm Kim Freeman, the Homeownership Section Manager. Along with myself and some of our staff will be running the meeting today. I do just want to let everyone know our director, Emma Shea Perfecto, is planning on joining us today and doing the kickoff of the meeting. But unfortunately, she has taken a bit ill and will not be joining us today. But as you all know, if you ever have any comments or suggestions, you can reach out to all of us, including her, and she'll get back to you. I just will let you all know she's out for the rest of the week. So not to expect an email if you have sent her one to be returned this week. Just so everyone is aware, we are recording this meeting and it will be posted on our website later this week on our technical advisory section of the homeownership part of the website, and it will be listed with today's date. With our technical advisories, we're trying to post all the recordings and keep all the information together. So the agenda and the technical advisory will be posted along with this recording. So if you know someone who is unable to attend and wants to listen to the recording, we will have that opportunity. I'm not going to do introductions of everyone on the call, but what I will ask is when you do speak for the first time, just to introduce yourself and your agency. I do want to let everyone know from the staff joining us from OHCS today. Most of you know Alicia Howell, who is our HOPE program analyst. I think most of you have all met Willie Schumann. He's our data analyst and research specifically assigned to homeownership, and he will be presenting first on our agenda. Scott Shaw, who is our senior program analyst with our Flex Lending program, and that is our new mortgage lending program that we will be launching later this year. And some of our partners have had, you've helped us have some programmatic conversations around what that program will look like. Cheryl Lyons, who a lot of you know through our section as our admin support, has moved on within our section, and she is now our residential loan specialist. And we have a new person joining our team, which is Angie. I'm going to try not to butcher her last name, Jimenez. And she is our new admin assistant, working really closely with Cheryl. So a lot of you will be seeing emails from Angie for your program reports, and she's just assisting Alicia and all of us. So we're grateful that she joined us on the 4th of January. And I'm not sure if Abinette is joining us, Abinette Gabray, who is our other HOPE program analyst, and she's working on the Restore Health and Safety program. And I just want to pause and make sure there's not any other OHCS staff who've joined that I may not be aware that we're joining today. If so, would you just let me know? Great, I'm going to take that I've introduced everyone. So for some of you that have been our partners for a really long time, about 3 years ago, we had the conversation about increasing the down payment assistance funds from what used to be $5,000 per homeowner to $15,000 per homeowner. We did that with the approval of our Housing Stability Council. And at that time, we heard from several partners that that amount, the increase from $5,000 to $15,000 was not enough, but we agreed that we would increase it to that for the time being. And we promised to have a partner meeting. And here we are 2 years plus later to have the conversation of what is the next amount of down payment assistance look like through this program. Thus the reason why we're having our meeting today. We have a really packed agenda, but it's also the opportunity for us to hear from our partners for things on our agenda and other things. We will have the chat box open. So if for some reason you don't get to ask a question, but you have some questions, please put them in the chat, and all the OHCS staff members will be reviewing that, and we'll make sure that they get addressed as well. Willie, I want to thank Willie up front before his presentation. He's done a lot of some amazing data work to help us set the context today of what it looks like. I know most of our partners, you probably have seen this data. You are on the boots on the ground providing services to first-time home buyers, people seeking financial literacy and counseling, and all of the amazing work everyone is doing. So I know some of this may be some repeat, but I think it will help us set the context for our discussion today. We will take a break, even though on the agenda there's no break. We just sat down and wanted to cover a lot of things and kind of went, oh, we didn't really allow for a break. So we'll probably take a break about 3 at least to give everyone a quick pause to get a drink of water or coffee, or just have a stretch break. We will also have the ability to do an easy retro or the fun retro, the posted notes for voting. We'll get that link in the chat about halfway through, and we'll have that opportunity. And we'll leave it up until Thursday, probably at the close of business. So through tomorrow, if someone doesn't have the option to, get it done today, we want to make sure everyone has the ability to provide your comments with that as well. Before we go ahead and get started, does anyone have any questions or any comments before we get going?
Hey, Kim, do you have this agenda emailed to us?
We did not email the agenda out. We can put the link in the chat if that helps, Daniel.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Okay.
I have it. Thank you.
It is, the agenda is also posted on our website under home ownership, and the technical advisory section of the website is listed there as well. But if Cheryl or Alicia can put it in the chat, that would be great. Any other comments or questions before we get going? Perfect. So the link is now in the chat for everyone. That's great. Thank you. So at this time, it is my pleasure to turn the first part of the meeting over to Willie Schumann. As I've introduced, he is our data and research analyst for homeownership. He does other things with the data and research team too, but we are grateful that he is truly assigned to homeownership, and it's been with the agency for a little while now, maybe 6 months or so, and he's just hit the ground running, and I'm grateful for all of his suggestions, his input, us letting us pick his brain, and he's done a lot of work on the Tableau dashboard as well. And so just a wealth of knowledge, and we're glad that he has joined our agency. So at this time, Willie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim, and thanks everyone for allowing me the space to hopefully provide a little bit of context around the current state of the program, as well as what we see looking at survey data, essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And just to reiterate, I am Willie Schumann. I am a research analyst on the research team assigned to home ownership. A little bit about myself. I'm a trained research scientist. I studied ants. I have a master's in biology, but I pivoted to government because I didn't see a whole lot of my research with ants helping humans. And I really wanted to use the skills that I developed in grad school and apply it meaningfully, and use data and research as a way to inform government practice and hopefully improve the lives of individuals. So without further ado, I'll review some of the insights that I've gathered from looking at the data. And again, this is just to provide context. And there are some caveats, obviously, because I'm using survey-based data coming from the American Community Survey. Each estimate that's provided has a margin of error associated with it, because it's very difficult to survey every individual. Ask any census worker that, they'll tell you that. So these are surveys that try to capture a wide swath of the population within Oregon, and then make projections or estimates to try to extrapolate to the state level. So I used that data. I used CoreLogic as well, which is a mortgage based data company. So they collect a bunch of mortgage data as well as housing price and rental data. And so I use some of those things, and I'll go into more detail. And if you have any questions, feel free to chat me in the Zoom chat. And I will also be providing links to some of the images that I'm showing. So I have interactive dashboards that you guys can dig around in if you want. So I'll provide links to those as well. So just to start off, just a little bit background around the program for anyone who doesn't know. The DPA program is funded through document recording fees. So 14% of fees goes to fund the homeownership programs and HOPE. And then we set 25% of those fundings for veteran programs. And the HOPE programs incorporate an umbrella over a bunch of different programs. So funding goes to homeownership centers. So some of you might be in this meeting today. Some of it goes to down payment assistance funding. We're just starting to launch the Restore Health and Safety program that Abinet will be running, and getting through that to get that up and running. And that program is meant to assist with home repair as well as weatherization for low-income individuals who are struggling to maintain a safe and warm, stable house. And then, of course, we offer training and technical assistance using this funding. Another source of funding for DPA are the construction excise tax. Although these aren't statewide like the other HOPE programs, this is based on current or has only a specific amount of jurisdictions that have a construction excise tax. So 15% of this funding comes from this tax, and it's used to provide down payment assistance. So in addition to or supplementing down payment assistance, so you can get CET funds and you can get HOPE DPA funds to combine towards the total of the max amount allowed for DPA. And so here's just a list of the jurisdictions that are participating in this right now. So we have, pretty good representation of the state. We have Coast, we have Eastern Oregon, the Willamette Valley metro areas. And you can see that a lot of municipalities are involved in this program, as well as 2 counties. So this is something that can expand across the state. And then I just wanted to give just a brief overview of where the current program sits at. So right now, the maximum amount allowed under DPA is $15,000. And this comes from your HOPE general funds as well as CET, depending on your jurisdiction. And like I mentioned before, you can layer the HOPE and CET together. So you can say, get 5,000 from CET and 10,000 from HOPE, or vice versa. The only eligibility criteria we have right now is that individuals have to be making less than 100% of the area median income. The program is set to sunset in December 31st, 2021. And so far through 2020, we have served 53 families. I also dug a little bit into that sample of those 53 individuals. And we see that the average cost of a home, the average price of a home that's purchased using DPA of these 53 individuals was around $270,000. The average amount of DPA we received was around $13,200. And of those that received DPA funding, 25% identified as people of color. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And I know that the point of this conversation today is to talk about where we want the future of the program to be. So I'm just going to go through kind of my research method. So I kind of looked at other states, see what their DPA funding programs are like. And then I'm going to provide some data that I think is of value. And just to be clear, Oregon works a little bit differently than all the other states I'm comparing us to. They are all lending programs. OHCS is more of a funding source. And so we provide funds for partners to use to not fund, but to execute the DPA program. So it's slightly different in that these government agencies that I'll be referring to are actually lending the money out. So there's an incentive for them to get a return so that they can continue to recycle the funds. And I chose a wide variety of states. I tried to stick to some of our neighbor states and similar sized states, as well as showing some regional variation across the country. So the first two I looked at were Colorado and Idaho. And again, they have very different styles when it comes to down payment assistance. For Colorado, I couldn't get an actual amount of money that they provide, but they do require applicants to bring forward at least $1,000 of their own money towards purchasing a home. And there was income restrictions, about 80% of the area median income. And you have to attend counseling, home purchase counseling. And the only thing I could find about Colorado is they just offer low interest and flexible loans that must be repaid. So theirs was the most, I would say, hands-off DPA program that I saw when researching this. So I just wanted that as a contrast to what we require and what we reward. Idaho also has more strict eligibility, of course, because they're lending money. They require a credit score, 640 for the first loan, 680 for the second. Again, you also have to participate in homebuyer education. You must contribute 0.5% of the purchase price of your own funds. And there's an income limit of $110,000, which is higher in some regions of our state than others. And then what they do is they award a 3.5% loan that's based on the purchase price. It's a forgivable loan, but they also allow for a second mortgage at a fixed 5% for the year. I also looked at Washington because Washington, like Oregon, is experiencing a housing crisis, and they had the most, I would say, wide-ranging, almost tiered structure to how they loan money out. So again, they have high income eligibility, so up to $145,000. That has to do with median incomes in Washington being higher than the average. And again, since it's a lending program, they have a credit score requirement of 620. And then they tend to structure theirs location-based. So Seattle, you can get up to $55,000, obviously, because Seattle is an extremely expensive city to live in, and purchasing a home is very difficult without some significant assistance. Same with Bellingham, which is a suburb of Seattle. So it's slightly less, but still $40,000 is a significant amount of money. Tacoma, Pierce County, and East King County are between $20,000 and $30,000. Typically, the average amount that's offered statewide is $10,000, or between 4% and 5% of the mortgage loan. So they'll provide that down payment. I wanted to look at a really big state, so I chose Texas instead of California, because California is just, their housing market is crazy and may not be the best to compare to. So again, Texas also has income less than or equal to 115% of AMI, credit score, homebuyer education requirement. but they also include a housing price limit. So they have a tiered structure that's also based on location. So more expensive areas to live have a higher cap or threshold on their housing price. But for example, if you wanted to live in the Austin area and use their programs, they would require you to have a limit on the purchase price of your home of around $300,000. So you couldn't purchase a home within that county or city that was greater than that using their funds. And so their award is up to 5% of the mortgage as a down payment. And they also cover closing costs. So that's something that we don't do necessarily. And then the last two I looked at were Minnesota and Georgia. We looked to Minnesota for a lot of ideas. And so I just wanted to see how they stacked up against us. Again, they have high income limits up to $154,000. And that's based on where you live and the size of your family. And then their programs, they have multiple programs, but the highest award you can get from any one program is around $17,000. So similar to ours, around $15,000. Georgia, I also looked at, since that's a new up-and-coming market. The income limits they have set based on family size. They also have home prices, home price limits. So as you can see, $200,000, but there are exceptions outside specific counties. So your fuller counties might offer more since it's a more urban, dense county. And they also want to know what your liquid assets are. So they want to ensure that you don't have any liquid assets, it seems, to be able to put down payment on before you qualify for the assistance. So you can't have more than $20,000 or 20% of the mortgage, whatever is greater in liquid assets. Because the assumption being that if you have this as liquid assets, you don't necessarily need the assistance. And theirs was kind of one of the more weaker awards granted. It's $5,000 with their state-run program. And then you can get up to $15,000, but that's accessing the hardest hit funds. And since that program is constantly in flux in terms of funding, it's not necessarily a reliable award, because once the hardest hit fund runs out, there's no additional reward that they can give. And yeah, I just want to emphasize that these are lending programs. So there's an incentive for these states to try to get some return on the loan that they're giving to help out so that they can continue to funnel that money to other clients. And we don't necessarily loan out any money through our DPA program. Again, we provide funding to our partners who then execute the program however it works for their clients. So next thing I'm going to dive into is the data itself. So again, this data comes from survey data. So these are estimates. They're trying to be as accurate as possible, but there is some ambiguity around the actual amount. So I just want to throw that as a caveat. If some of these look like outlandishly ridiculous to you, that's probably why. There can be some skewing, especially when we're talking about smaller populations, which in Oregon will be most likely your racial minorities. So you can see some skewing there because there's just not enough, what's the word I'm looking for? Not enough clarity within the survey itself to be able to get a representative sample within the state. So this is the best that I can do given the federal government data that I used. So just keep that in mind. There are some caveats to this data, but it's still a good place to start and look, as well as, there is some truth to this. So we'll see patterns that happen across different counties. So I highlighted 4 counties. I highlighted Multnomah, obviously, since we're talking about DPA, and one of the conversations we'll likely have is, do we increase it or do we decrease it? And if we were looking at where housing is the most difficult to achieve and most expensive, Multnomah County is one of those counties that we want to look at. And so what this graph is it shows the max affordable housing price for someone at 100% MFI within Multnomah County. I got the MFI data from the ACS, the American Community Survey. I got the median home price from CoStar. So this is a median home price based on monthly median home prices for the year of 2019 that I got from CoreLogic. And as you can see, white non-Hispanics are able to afford the median home price based on income and actually exceed the ability to afford a median priced home within Multnomah County. And then if you look at everything as a whole, you kind of lose part of that nuance. So if you look at the total line right here, I'll hover my mouse over it. That's just kind of flattens everything out and shows that, oh, well, people who are making, MFI in Multnomah County obviously can afford a home. But if you look deeper at different racial group breakouts, you'll notice they are far from being able to afford a median priced home within Multnomah County. Specifically, Hispanic or Latinos or Black or African American Oregonians struggle to be able to afford homes within Multnomah County. So you can see that as you go down, affordability for a home decreases. And so the numbers that you're seeing on the left, that's the maximum price that they can afford at their income. So for a Black or African American individual within Multnomah County, the maximum they can afford is a house that's $220,000. And Hispanics, it's only $250,000, which is significantly lower than the median highest price, which is around $394,000 or around $400,000. So that's a significant gap. And when I calculated these, I used the $15,000 that we already allow for in DPA. So the numbers I came up assume that everyone is receiving that $15K. So it just kind of shows that even with that assistance, it's still very difficult to afford a home within Multnomah County. Okay, computer. There we go. So here's some more just kind of general statistics around the population makeup of Multnomah County. Some of this data comes from HMDA, the Housing Mortgage Disclosure Act, and it's for the year 2019. It also relies on CHAZ data, which is a data set that's specifically made by the American Community Survey for HUD. So those are the two data sources that I used to create this. And I wanted to show you what they say that the median family income for Multnomah County, as you can see, it's very high, $87,000 is the assumed median family income in Multnomah County. And like I said, the sales price is around $400,000 for a home. I also wanted to show a little bit about educational attainment and how that affects wages. So you see that to be even close to median family income, you have to have a graduate degree. That is an estimate of about $70,000 on average is what you get paid with the graduate degree in Multnomah County. So even that's $17,000 in the recorded median family income. So to be even able to afford a home, you would need to be close to that median family income. And then to be even at that income, you would need to attain a graduate degree, which, as we know, is not possible for every population within our state. And then I also provided some breakdowns of where each race lies on the MFI spectrum. And so you'll notice that the majority of individuals living in Multnomah County are between less than 100% MFI and less than 30% MFI, with Black or African Americans being disproportionately represented in less than 30% MFI, which means that they're making significantly less. And you'll see that white alone, white individuals are more likely to be greater than 100% than their counterparts. And you also see that Asian alone is kind of 50-50-ish between greater than 100% and then lower than 100%. And you'll see this trend play out throughout these other counties that we look at, but I just wanted to highlight it. Multnomah County also has a significant amount of people of color who have 40 or 50 to 60% debt to income ratios when they're taking out loans. So like if you look at Native Hawaiian, that's around 21% of Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders have around 50 to 60% debt to income ratio, which is very difficult to continue to afford living in your city if that's the kind of debt to income ratio you have. And then Black and African Americans is around 9%. Asian and white is around 5%, same with 2 or more races. But still, when we look at other counties, the proportion of their population that is at this debt to income ratio is much lower. I also wanted to show just kind of the loan type breakout. Since historically we assume that racial minorities are more likely to get government-backed loans like FHA and VA guaranteed loans than conventional loans. And this kind of plays out. The majority of loans taken out these days are conventional loans, but you do see that the top bar is American Indian or Alaska Native. They're more likely to receive these government-backed or government-insured loans, as well as most racial groups have, or more likely to have these loans than their white counterparts, except for the Asian group, as you can see, have more conventional loans. And the last thing I just wanted to show is Multnomah County, just the cost burden in general. So this is divided by owners and renters. Owners are on the left side of the screen, renters are on the right side of the screen, at least for me. I might have that backwards because I'm not mirroring it. But you'll see that the majority of renters within each racial category, even white, show that they are either cost burden, which means they pay more than 30% of their income as rent, or severely cost burden, which is more than 50% of their income paid as rent. And you'll notice that Black or African Americans are the worst, not the worst, poor language choice, but have the most significant amount of their renter population at severely cost burden. So they're spending more than 50% of their rent on, and that's 45% of African American and Black renters, which is a significant group of people. And that's a significant burden to be experiencing within a city that's only getting increasingly, or a county that's only getting more and more expensive to live in. So this goes to show you that like renters are struggling to afford their payments. Even if you do own a home in Multnomah County, there are still people who are struggling to afford their mortgage payments. Between around 25 to 30% of people are cost burdened to some degree while still owning their home. So this is the kind of population, that we're ideally trying to target with these programs. And so this is kind of what we see among racial breakouts within owner and renter occupied units. So I'll just go on to the next county. So I wanted to choose a more rural coastal county for comparison, since we tend to think that more rural counties are more affordable, cost of living is lower, housing prices are lower. In Lincoln County, we see it's easier to afford a home. And even if you are a person of color, it's easier to afford a home in Lincoln County. Most groups can afford the median home price in Lincoln County, with the exception of American Indian, Alaska Native, and Hispanic or Latino individuals. So there's still some issue with creating access for those groups to accessing a median priced home. They just can't afford whatever the median price home in Lincoln County is. And again, this assumes that they're receiving $15,000 of down payment assistance, but that is the only down payment assistance that they receive to get these numbers. And again, we see the MFI is much lower than in Multnomah County, $57,000. The median house price is much lower. It's around $262,000. But again, to be able to achieve this median family income, it's more likely that you need a graduate degree living in Lincoln County to be able to afford these homes. And again, here's an issue that might be skewed if we look at MFI by race and the number of Black or African American individuals at 30%, but less than 50% MSI. You'll see that it takes up around 75% of this bar. That could be accurate, but it could also be a reflection of a small sample size of Black or African American individuals living within Lincoln County. And so they just weren't able to sample enough to get a better picture. That being said, this is not uncommon in Oregon for racial minorities to be on the lower income spectrum, as well as throughout the United States. You'll notice that they still have a significant amount of debt to income ratio. Black or African Americans do, as well as American Indian and Alaska Native. And then again, when we look at breakdowns by loan type, we see that a lot of both Black and American Indian, Alaska Native get the majority of their funding through these government insured bonds, FHA and VA guaranteed loans. We also see a pretty stark contrast with owner occupied and rent occupied. Again, this could be a sample size issues. I don't know if it's necessarily true that 100% of Black or African American individuals are, all of them within Lincoln County are severely cost burdened. But at least the ones surveyed for this data are. It's still important to see that the racial minorities in Oregon are struggling to afford to pay what they already pay for rent, even in a county that's not as expensive to live in as Lincoln County. And you also notice that most of the owner-occupieds will see that have less of a burden than we saw in Multnomah County, with the exception of Black and African American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. I also wanted to look at another more rural county, so I chose Jackson, which is kind of in the valley, but Southern Oregon. We also see, again, people are struggling to afford the median home price within this county, even at 100% MFI, and especially if you're a racial minority, you're less likely to be able to afford a house within where you live. Jackson County's MFI is a little bit higher than Lincoln County's, same with their median house prices. And again, we see the same pattern. You're more likely to be close to MFI if you have a graduate's degree. So again, you have to have all this investment in education. We see that racial minorities have a larger percentage of their populations below 100% MFI. And we also see this trend throughout all of them, is that the majority of people who are taking out loans in Oregon are between 30 and 49% in a debt to income ratio, which are the orange and red bars in this graph. So we see that throughout the other ones. So if we go back, you'll notice that the orange and red bars in Lincoln County also make up the majority, and the orange and red bars in Multnomah County. So people are getting loans that are between 30 and 49%, while they have 30 to 49% debt to income ratio, which is traditionally not what we would like to see if we're assuming that people shouldn't pay more than 30% of their income as towards their housing. This is a concerning pattern to see that some people are spending upwards to 49% of that. Yeah, and again, we see similar breakdowns in the loan type by race. Racial minorities look like they are more likely to receive these government-backed loans, but conventional loans, again, are still the most popular loans being used to purchase homes. And the last county I wanted to look at was Deschutes. Oh, excuse me. We'll go over the renter and owner-occupied units. Again, this is another county where renters are either cost burdened or severely cost burdened across racial dynamics. With the exception of the white population, they're more likely to be severely cost burdened. But yeah, again, like if our goal is to increase our access to our products and help those who are struggling to pay rent to find a more stable housing environment with a home, these are the kind of people we want to be looking at. And we can see that over 50% of Black or African American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, or other identified races are severely cost burdened, which means they're paying over 50% of their income on rent. And then finally, like I said, I wanted to look at Deschutes County because this is a county that's also experiencing higher price homes, especially recently. I think I read an article saying that the median house price in Bend was around $750,000, which is extremely expensive. That's not what I calculated using the data that I had. The median home price was around $380,000, but that's all of Deschutes County. And this thing that I was looking at that said Bend's median house price was $750,000 was just looking at the city of Bend. And again, same pattern. If you're part of a racial minority group, you're less likely to be able to afford a house if you're making 100% of median family income. Deschutes County has a higher MFI than Jackson or Lincoln, and it's closer to what we see in Multnomah County. Same with the house price, around $375,000. Again, graduate degrees are more likely to be close to that MFI. Again, we see that racial groups are more likely to be below 100% MFI, looking at this top graph. And also debt to income ratio we see the majority between that 30 and 49%, as well as higher percentages of 50 to 60% in Black or African American or two or more races. And again, we see this loan breakdown, more government FHA, VA loans being taken out by people of color, while conventional loans are still in the majority. And finally, we see similar patterns where renters are experiencing high cost burden, a huge portion severely cost burden, between 20% and 100%, although I'm not sure if that's necessarily accurate, but it is still highlighting that there's this discrepancy between renters and owners on their ability to afford their home or their housing. And that's pretty much what I chose to highlight were these four counties. I will put in the chat a link to some of the dashboards that have more interactive elements so you can dig deeper into it. I could talk for a long time about this data, and I'm more than willing to answer questions. But I also encourage you to explore the data that I presented and come to your own conclusions. This is just based on my review of it. And then I'm sure I've received a lot of questions in chat, so let me check that really quickly. Diane Lynn Proudground from Proudground says that there are challenges to the lack of inventory homes at all affordable levels in Lincoln County. That's an important thing to note is I didn't take into account the actual availability of homes. So that's an excellent point. We are seeing that in places like Lincoln County and Multnomah and Deschutes, the available housing stock is very low and it goes by fast. Should I? Yes, so Bio asked if they should assume a household that makes the MFI can afford a house at the median sales price. That was the assumption I made. I incorporated several things into that calculation, including like mortgage insurance payments, home insurance payments. So it incorporates typically every amount of owning as many aspects as I could of the cost of owning a home. And it's assuming that, yes, if you do make the 100% MFI, that you should be able to afford that median home price. But that doesn't take into account, like Diane was saying, the availability of homes. And I think those are the only questions I see. I'll make sure to include those links in the chat so you can spend some time exploring. Feel free to reach out to me through my email in the future if you have questions after looking at it more in detail. It's just willie.schuman@oregon.gov. Willie is spelled W-I-L-L-Y, and then you can see my last name by my little video screen. And this is all quantitative data that I showed you. So this is all data that's based on surveys, estimates, or loan data. And these are, again, estimates. They're not necessarily 100% accurate, but they give us at least a good picture of what the reality looks like at the state level and county level. So it doesn't provide all the necessary context that, say, qualitative interviews would have, or further surveying data of our actual clients, or your guys' lived experience as partners who deal with the realities of the housing market more so than our program does. So that's kind of my segue into this next topic of how do we get good qualitative data? And hopefully that's with partnership with you guys. As much as I enjoy qualitative data, and I think there needs to be a balance between quantitative and qualitative, I just don't have access to any of the context that qualitative data would give to these graphics that I showed you. And so part of what I kind of like to start a discussion on is, what do you think is missing from my analysis in terms of like that qualitative, that storytelling element that we need to keep in mind when we're trying to help those most vulnerable in Oregon? Do we need to interview more people? Is there a survey we can design that can help answer some of the questions that, numbers aren't able to quantify? Like, what is it like to buy a house in Oregon? What is it like to buy a house in your county? Are you outbid often? Do you experience any kind of racism or prejudice when going for a loan or purchasing a house? Those kind of questions that aren't necessarily able to be answered with, the number of loans or mortgages given out in a given year. So yeah, I just want to kind of open it up for a discussion around how we can provide more context to this data that I've shown you. And thank you all for your patience and listening to me talk about this stuff. I'll get those links in the chat.
Thank you, Willie. So if you have, we'll go with raised hands. Nanette.
That was a clapping, that wasn't it? Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. So yeah, so one of the things that I know the data and research team have talked about is the qualitative data and the stories, right? Lived experiences. You all are the best advocates in our room today. You all know that, and I applaud you all the time. I listened to the Housing Alliance, your last meeting on the legislative agenda, and oh my gosh, it was amazing. But, and you help our end user, right? So what we're looking for is how do we, Oregon Housing, get that qualitative data in a story format in an easy way, so it's not burdening you, our partners, but also that the homeowner or whomever we're surveying for that data will want to respond to us, so then the data team can take that information and actually help us with our presentations to the legislature, to our Housing Stability Council, to our executive team. How best do we do that? So we're just we're asking for any feedback that either you've tried in your organization to get some of this data and have been successful, and then how or what should we at Oregon Housing do to get that information?
That we did have something in the chat. Bayo made a comment regarding thanks, Willie. It says everything's fascinating. And he said that I think comparing experiences with realtors across different income levels and ethnic groups would be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Bio. It would be great to see what realtors are dealing with and how they experience it, especially across different income levels and ethnic groups. Because there's a lot of data out there that suggests that different ethnic groups receive different services and are directed to different properties and things like that when seeking housing. So it would be interesting to see.
Well, Diane Lynn here from Prague Ground. I just am trying to kind of get my head around the messages we're trying to send to what audience. And of course, you need data. And I think all this public policy should be structured upon good data in conjunction with a strategic plan and a vision for how we take these numbers and turn them into stories and actual, real life application on the ground here. I think the case has been made clearly that there's a huge gap, and there are a lot of other factors, including inventory, that make it even harder under COVID-19, for example, just for now. So to add insult to injury, we were making progress before that hit, and now we're set back even farther. So you might be hearing a few crickets, partly because I think, at least for me, I'm trying to figure out, the case can be made. There's great data from the racial disparity task force that can be used. And so we got to figure out how to help you, help us, help you, help our clients better. And 15,000 is certainly nowhere near close to helping fill the gap between what people can afford and what units cost.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Diane. COVID complicates these things, especially collection of qualitative data, which we typically want to be doing in person, interviewing people. And you're right, there's a lot of different variables to consider. And it is one of those things, help us, help you, help us, So I do appreciate those comments. Thank you.
Shannon.
Well, thank you so much for all of this data and for the links, Willie. It's so fascinating. And I'm already thinking of ways we can share this with our own network. So thank you. I will say, we've got this moment, right, where interest rates are historically low, where the Oregon bond program is historically low. And unfortunately, because there is a lack of inventory, I'm also watching house prices bump up like $50K per house from 6 months ago. And that's tricky, right? That's tricky. So, because we don't have enough supply. And to Rose's point, of course, we're working on a piece of legislation in the coming session to make it easier to create those shared wall, less large homes, to make that more economically viable and to have those in more places in our state. We know it's going to take quite a few strategies, but I just wanted to, it looks like you're nodding vigorously, so you're well aware of these dynamics. But that's sort of a moment in time, and I'm feeling, it's more just an observation than anything like an answer, right? I'm feeling a sense of urgency because historically low interest rates, right? There's an opportunity here, but then with that lack of inventory, it's also a challenge.
Yes, it is frustrating to have such low interest rates, and therefore loans are so much more affordable for people, but just not to have the inventory or the ability to afford those that are available. That is an excellent observation. And thank you, Amy, also for pointing out, the difference between median home price in Bend and an affordable mortgage for low income household is not the same thing. I totally recognize that. Unfortunately, the tools that we have when talking about housing affordability, like median income isn't always like the best either, right? And median house price, these are just, I had to have some kind of simplifying tool to be able to present something to you. But I do recognize that, it's so, a median home price is not reflexive of it being affordable. I agree. And something Shannon said reminded me of another point I wanted to make. Oh man, what was it? I'll remember it. I'll come back.
Hi, everybody. This is Bill Peterson, Movement Mortgage. I was just going to chime in from a lender's perspective in regards to this. The barrier to entry to get a home loan has a few pieces: income, credit, and down payment. Right? Those are our big pieces. Down payment is primarily what you guys are talking about on this call, and I'm really here just to listen because I'm curious. But the rules around income and debt ratio are pretty liberal. You can typically borrow up to 50% of your gross income, pre-tax income. That's a very liberal number. Credit, we allow credit scores that are down, to sub 600 on certain loan products. It's very liberal. So the most difficult piece when it comes to housing is often the down payment piece. And if you're considering, like, do we increase, decrease, what do we do here? That's the big barrier we run into as lenders. So just throwing that out there.
Thanks, Bill. That's great to hear. It's good to hear from a lender perspective, and that is often the case with a lot of people going into home ownership or trying to purchase a home is the down payment. And so that leads us to this conversation is what's the best way to help those most vulnerable or those struggling to afford a home within the state of Oregon. Yeah.
And especially in ethnic communities without generational the passing of that generational wealth developed from housing. It's not inherited, it's not moved on, it's not passed on. So you guys are a huge key in helping fix that problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and like we're talking about specific housing markets with Bend and Portland being very expensive, we see other states doing a tiered approach to their down payment assistance where, for example, Washington, if you're living or trying to purchase a home in King County or Seattle, you get a significant more down payment. But these are all, again, this is trade-off. If we increase the down payment in specific regions, that means there's less for other regions, so it's a difficult tightrope to walk. Yes.
Hey, I'm sorry, I forgot what your name is. I apologize. What was your name?
My name is Willie.
Willie, I'm sorry. Yeah,
no
sorry
worries.
Willie. A quick question, just a little chime. One of the things that I've noticed too is that right now, if clients, we're talking about affordability, and I don't know, and then we might even talk about this a little bit later, but I don't know how many people realize that if someone could be potentially mortgage ready, but they're like in an apartment where they have a lease. Now, let's say that with a 15,000 and they've got like $3,500 enough for the earnest money, you know, this is great. But now if they, you know, I don't tell the clients what to do or what not to do with that. I disclose that right off the bat. But the option is that, you know, if you're going to break your lease and then you lose the $3,500 because early, now you're no longer technically mortgage ready because you don't have the earnest money. And that's one of the things a lot of people forget, that, you know, as a housing counselor, I have to stress the fact that realistically being mortgage ready is having more in case you're in a lease, you know, more than 2.5 times your mortgage, which is the highest end. I always go by the high end on the breaking the lease. And a lot of people don't realize that. I was like, well, that's an option. It's a choice for the person. But yeah, what if they say, well, because they're listening and they do that, and all of a sudden now they lose the money. But it's like, well, Daniel said, no, no. I encourage our clients to consider the options, the pros and cons. Now, if they have other means to get the money, and it's a pretty much a sure thing, then they make the choice. Then realistically, we need to be sensitive about that, because, you know, what if someone is only thinking about, you know, getting to their house, now they don't have no earnest money down. And I express to them that there is no program, and I don't think there ever has been or will be one that's going to help you with the earnest money, because that's technically skin in the game, you know. So that's just my 2 cents right there.
No, that's good that you bring that up. I mean, OHCS does have an IDA program, which can be used in tandem with DPA to try to mitigate that, right? You know, encourage people to save money to put forward towards a home that we match. But you're right. I mean, it's important for educators and counselors to emphasize, like, you know, you're going to lose money that you will likely need to purchase this home or be able to afford this home. And I think this was kind of the point that Shannon helped me think of, and you just reminded me, is like, we also want to make sure that we're preparing people to be able to afford their mortgage in general. So even if interest rates are really low, we don't want to wind up in this situation where, you know, we get another subprime mortgage, you know, crisis where lending is really easy and affordable, but that doesn't necessarily take into account people's ability to afford that loan or whatnot. Yeah, anyway, thank you for sharing.
So I know if you guys have some suggestions just about how you're successful in getting qualitative data, that's just an area that we want to, I think, expand on. And I think it's not just for this program, but I know it's going to be utilized for some of our other programs within OHCS. It's that, I think, another piece, right, to help us tell the story. So, and then I know in our current down payment assistance program, as far as the data elements, we are asking for all the sources of down payment. And again, that helps us to put the picture together on our programs, all the funding sources that you guys are utilizing. You know, I've heard from many of the partners, and I mean this in a very good way, right, that you are using our funds, you may be using the IDA funds, you're using maybe City of Portland funds, you know, Habitat has a different model, right? Everyone's putting funds into the game, and you need all of those funds and usually 5 more buckets of funds, right? And so, again, that's part of the reason today, but we're just trying to track that so we can help tell the story from a data perspective. We are actually a little bit ahead of schedule. Wow, imagine that. Usually we aren't, but I do want to jump into the next topic, which is number 3. Should all grantees programs be the same? So let me just kind of share a little bit of context, and I'm sorry that Emma Shea's not here to kind of share this, her thoughts around this, but I'll do my best to share them. So when we've had discussions just around what programs look like, and if a prospective homeowner goes in door A and they get, let's say, a grant, and then they go in door B and they get a loan, you know, how is that, you know, we can talk about equity, we can talk about fairness, but if someone is in an area that has multiple partners, and I'm going to use the metro area, this is not anything against any of my metro partners, so please don't take it that way. But if I go into, again, door A and I'm able to get a grant, but had I walked into door B, I would have gotten a loan potentially with some loan fees or maybe some interest. And again, how are we, you know, looking at that long-term generational wealth, sustainability, affordability, and home ownership? And so that's kind of the next part of this conversation. I know each of our partners have some very unique programs, and they have, you know, it's your agency mission and how you are established and funded. And so I'm not, you know, we're not here to change any of those, but it's again to kind of have that conversation. If it's a loan, is it a zero interest loan? Is it, you know, forgiven over time? Is it, you know, paid back in the first 10 years if it's, you know, if you sell or refinance? So those are kind of some of the things that we've been talking about internally. And again, where we're wanting your feedback in reference to that. And we're really looking at maintaining and sustaining homeownership, right? Our goal, along with yours, is not just to get someone in the home to go, great, we've got people in homes. Yes, that's part of our mission, but we also want them to be able to maintain and sustain in their home, right? We want them to build that generational wealth for their families and have stable environments for their children to go to school and be successful. We don't want them to be stressed at a 60% debt to income ratio and then not be able to, you know, provide enough food for everyone to eat or pay utilities and all those things. As we know, as a homeowner, we all need to be sustainable. So that's kind of this next conversation. So again, we're open to thoughts and we want to hear from you. This is as much your conversation as ours. So I'm just curious for thoughts around all programs the same. We should all make it a loan. They should all be grants.
Well, Kim, Diane here. I'll at least start a couple quick thoughts and then hopefully generate some real kind of robust conversation about this topic. And we've had these conversations at the homeowner work group on multiple occasions. And the general consensus that I've understood along the way, because as everybody knows, there are a variety of different programs. They are structured differently. And ours is particularly unique, and it is not a loan product. I think in the final analysis, in a perfect world, while I know that the staff is trying to achieve some semblance of true fairness or some better fairness as it relates to, you know, the kinds of products that are available to different people in different places going to different doors, I still think that we just need, I think, to work together as an entire statewide team, we need the flexibility to be able to apply the product that both our internal capacities have been set up to achieve and our relationship with the buyers and all the things that have gone into the hard work of everybody on this call and others. And that both loan and grant products are really important to have in the toolkit for to serve people and meet them where they are statewide. You know, as everyone knows, we promote permitted affordability and wealth creation at the same time, because wealth creation obviously is crucial in these critical days of equity, justice, and dealing with the disparity, the gap between white homeowners and people of color. So we want to achieve both, and we want to make long-term investments in communities so that we don't have this rolling process of people getting displaced in 10 and 15 and 20 year cycles, because that's going to happen if we don't do that. We'll say that a million times. And still, we know that some loan programs are incredibly effective. So it would just be a crying shame, in my opinion, putting it out there, if we try to push every program into one approach or the other, that we can continue to achieve the maximum outcomes if we all work together and apply our best efforts to serving as many people as possible with both loan and grant resources.
I have a question. This is Bio Costaborian. You know, I am completely new at all of this, so this might be disregard, you know, if necessary. I guess, well, before I go there, I think this is really a question for Willie or anybody else if they know. Like, how successful is, you know, Washington or Texas or Georgia, how successful are those programs, which, you know, seem to be structured pretty differently than ours? Like, how successful are they at getting people in homes compared to us as a state?
That's an excellent question, Bio, and I do not have an answer. I primarily just wanted to see what the structure of their programs were. I don't actually know the efficacy of theirs compared to ours. I do know that at least this year, DPA, we've served 53 families and getting them into, at least through September, 53 families. That's something I can totally investigate and get back to you, Bio.
Thanks. And, you know, I ask because, you know, on the one hand, like it seems like Diane is saying, if I understand it correctly, like, well, if it isn't broke, then we shouldn't fix it. And on the other hand, I'm wondering, you know, I guess, and again, like this is, you know, might be my ignorance, but if we did kind of have a program that was closer to Washington's, for example, then that was like a loan program and, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Could it be, even though like that money isn't free, right? Like it's not like, you know, forgivable over time necessarily or anything like that. Would we be able to, I guess, reach a wider audience? I guess that's a question more than a suggestion. It's definitely I'm just curious as to what other people's thoughts on that are.
So Bio, it's Kim. I just want to let you know that we are working on our new Flex lending program. So we will have a different lending product like our sister housing finance agency. So right now we only have the Oregon Bond Residential Loan Program. And that's funded through the sale of tax exempt mortgage revenue bonds. And it's very scriptive for first-time home buyers only, unless it's been more than 3 years since you've owned a home. And so then you could, you know, utilize our program. And in the bond program, we do not offer down payment assistance. One, because it's not approved by HUD in our case, because we do not supply a gift letter up front. And so we will have the opportunity to create some more flexible programs to provide a flexible amount of down payment assistance through our new lending program. With our HOPE DPA money, we have always put that out competitively. That's actually a requirement of our HOPE programs, that all of the funds that come into HOPE go out competitively. You know, we could, so just hear me out. We could take that money and pair it with our lending program, but then that would mean we would not be able to put funds out to our partners, and then you can utilize them with your programs or have, you know, the programs that you've worked hard to establish in your organization. So it's really two separate programs. Most other state housing finance agencies do not have a separate what I'm going to say pot of money like we do. We're very unique in where we have the funds from the document recording fee that we can utilize, you know, to fund our homeownership centers, provide down payment assistance, you know, our restore health and safety and training and technical assistance. So your questions are very viable, and I hope you know that you can ask questions, and this is a safe spot, and we all can learn from each other. And that's what I always appreciate about our group, is everyone is great at sharing. And so with that, please continue to ask questions. I know we have a couple lenders on the phone, and from their perspective, I don't know if they want to jump in, how DPA looks from the lender perspective, if it is a loan versus a grant. I know sometimes there are some programmatic requirements from the lender's perspective. So I don't know if Josh or Bill want to jump in on that, but happy to just hear some back from that perspective.
Sure, definitely, Kim. And just to kind of add to what you're saying, it's really some of those other state products are a little bit different to what you're saying with how Oregon's looking at adding that flexible loan. And this is Josh from Loan Depot. I apologize for not giving the intro, but thanks for having me, Kim, and Oregon Housing. But from our perspective, the down payment assistance, if it's not a true gift forgiven at closing, then it is technically a quote unquote loan, even if it's a forgivable loan over 5 years, 3 years, 1 year after the borrower's been in the house. And if that nonprofit is that lien holder on that loan, it does change the landscape of how we view it as a lender and the availability of what that product can be used for. Since Oregon Housing is the funding source and they're collecting these funds and handing it out to the various agencies, it's really amazing because they're really promoting homeownership throughout the state. And it is very unique where they are working hand in hand with those agents, with you guys, you folks, which is really amazing. But the major challenge from a lender's perspective is really ensuring we have those proper approvals and we can check all those boxes where the funding source, but not only the lien holder, if it's a loan, has the proper HUD approvals or is eligible for certain various products. If one of those instances comes up where a nonprofit might not be approved, we do try and work with that agency and educate them on that process, on how to go about obtaining those approvals. But if anybody on the call ever has an issue or a question with that, please feel free to reach out to me as well. I'll be more than happy to walk through any of those process or procedures.
Hi, Kim. It's Karen Sachs at Dev Northwest. Hi, everybody. I think that I would just echo what Diane and what I saw from Suzanne and a couple others in the chat. I think the flexibility is really important. I think as community-based organizations serving different populations throughout the state, what we know to be true is that for some, and when we're talking about, trying to look at populations that have been historically marginalized and unable to access homeownership, that there are types of products that are very important for wealth creation for those communities. And also, as we're trying to work with other communities, looking at, let's just call it as it is, white families closer to middle income, there's a really, I think, a strong case to be made for a repayable loan as a good option for them, right? And then we're replenishing the funds. We're able to revolve those funds over time, which I think is a critically important way to utilize this resource in the future. So I think from our perspective, we would definitely champion the flexibility for agencies to be able to utilize the grant, a forgivable loan, or a repayable loan as needed.
Thank you, Karen.
I was trying to type in the chat, Kim. This is Bill again, but I can't type that much. Sorry. I'll just add both grant and lending programs typically are going to be acceptable in one way, shape, or form of another. The barrier that we kind of see sometimes is with the lending type of program, there is an approval needed by the first mortgage lender for the secondary, loan. And sometimes that's okay, and sometimes that's not okay. So there could be some more hoops to jump through in a lending program versus a grant program. But I know Idaho and Washington that we use are lending programs, and they're both very robust and work just fine.
Thank you, Bill. And Scott Shaw from Oregon Housing, because he's so quick on the computer, did put in the chat some production of what Arizona, Utah, and Washington. So I know from our involvement with our 11 Western states of housing finance agencies and homeownership, most of our partners have had banner years in 2020, even with the pandemic, and 2019 were also great years for them. So it's a tool that we know that is greatly needed, and I appreciate everyone's comments around flexibility. I will echo the comments made by Diane and Karen. You guys have established, along with other partners, you have established programs in place. So it's working. And so we just need to look at that. I do want to comment too for Katie's comment in the chat box. If we were to go to a loan per se, and that was the only option, then, make it a no interest, no payment loan. So that way it would be, you could say the same for everyone. So, so thank you on that.
Kim, I posted the Easy Retro, the sticky notes. So in the chat box, you might have to scroll up. It's above some of the other chats. There's a link to the Easy Retro, and to get some feedback on grantee programs. If you want to vote on some of the stickies that are already there that we talked about, or add stickies to and comment on what you feel would work best or what your ideas are. We're trying to get more information and take this back so that we can have more conversations when we're done with our meeting here today. So we're using this Easy Retro, you might know it as Fun Retro, to help us determine what's going to work. Everybody has, I believe 10 votes that you can use. So to start out with, we can change that. But for right now, if you could go ahead and vote on the ideas under the grantee program. And then also, if you have other thoughts and comments, to include that if you did not already put that in the chat.
So Alicia, hi. So how are we, I'm sorry, I had to step away for just a second. How are we supposed to vote?
If you grab the link that's in the chat, it says it's a link to Easy Retro.
Oh, okay.
It'll link you to what you're seeing on your screen. And so you can't use what's on the Zoom meeting, but if you use the link, you can go in there and click on and vote. Yep, somebody already has. So you can vote and add if you want to.
I just want to make a comment. Again, I apologize. We have all kinds of little emergencies popping up here and there. And thank you too for organizing this call. So have we thought about maybe a combination of loan and grant? Especially because people, are going to need even more help now in purchasing because the market's getting away, income's not keeping up, as you know. So has that been part of the conversation? Is that a thought at all? Hello?
Yes, we can. I mean, we were kind of talking loan or grant, but it surely could be a combination.
I mean, it could be a combination because there could be just a base amount, which, the $12,000 is good. Of course, you're going to see that folks need, the gap is bigger than that, but the folks we've been working with have been able to be able to purchase at the rate, at the housing rate that's right now, most, but they're still struggling with bringing to closing that gap, besides the 12,000. The other concern I have, especially when you start going with loan and then it becomes a lien on the house, you're kind of taken away from the whole mission. The whole mission is to help, especially people of color, to build wealth. And you're taking that out of the equation once you start putting liens on homes. Okay, so I just want to throw those two comments out. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. One of the comments I want to address too in the chat from Debbie about if all agencies are offering forgivable loans certified as secondary lenders under HUD. So I know some of our partners in this particular down payment grant and in previous have had trouble with getting approval from lenders. It's kind of like some earlier what Josh was talking about. And so each of those programs have to be approved by the lender. And so thoughts on that? I know from the HUD lender, the HUD website, we have 4 agencies in Oregon that are approved under HUD for secondary financing. So any one of those have a comment on what the process was? And
this is Sarah with Portland Housing Center. We are an approved provider of secondary financing through HUD. And really what that means is that we can pair our lending products with an FHA loan. We do it because we have a tandem second that we do, our MAP product. We do not offer these funds as a loan. We offer them as a grant. I would say if they are required to do the HUD secondary approval for the sake of doing it as a deferred loan, I would think that it would be a deterrent for a lot of agencies. It's a pretty arduous process to be certified and then recertify every 2 years. A lot of documents, lot of work. And like I said, we have an additional product that we are mainly using it for. But I would say that that would potentially be a deterrent to agencies if it's required that it be a loan.
thank you, Sarah, for jumping in on that. I was hoping one of you that's approved would jump in and just give some context on that. So, okay, that's great. So Debbie, I hope that answers your question. If not, I know Sarah would be happy to probably have any more further conversations. And I have been trying to track down through NCSHA, which is our national group for the housing finance agencies. I've been working with our homeownership contact there to try and find a contact at HUD to kind of get some more direct information on this as well. So as soon as I can track down a contact and get more information, I'll be sure to share it out too.
Hey, Kim, this is Josh with Loan Depot again. I have a contact at the Santa Ana Hawk, Sandra Montgomery. She signs the actual HUD letters. I'll be more than happy to connect you with her.
Okay, that'd be great. Great.
Hi, it's Heidi at Portland Housing.
Hi, Heidi.
Hi, hey, I have a contact at HUD as well. The gentleman that works for Sandra, actually, who facilitates all the paperwork. Charles might be a little easier to reach.
Okay. That is awesome. Thank you. Yeah, our NCHA, Rosemary is our homeownership person. She was a little, not confused, but was a little taken back that there would be some hurdles. And so, and she hadn't heard it. But again, Oregon is unique to a lot of the housing finance agencies across the state. So we have, just different sources of funding that we put out compared to some of our other housing finance agencies who are strictly homeownership lending and then, multifamily development. So they don't have a lot of the other programs that we do here at Oregon Housing. So thank you.
Hey, Kim, question about the voting. Can we vote for like multiple things? Like, is it loan repayable only or loan forgivable only, or we can have like loan repayable and loan forgivable and grant? Like, am I understanding that correctly?
So Alicia set this up, and I'm going to let her answer that because I think we probably neglected to tell you how many votes you had total.
You have 10, but we're trying to get, if you want to put if you want to put one on each of them, you can, but, and of course we can always allocate more, but we're trying to get a feel for what the preference is of the group. So you can add a sticky that says, I like all three. That, and maybe somebody wants to vote on that. So feel free to do that because we're trying to get a good picture of what the group is interested in. And so that might be a good sticky to add.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for bearing with us. We are learning how to do this easy retro, fun retro. I know others have used it and are just, I mean, I've seen it where the sticky notes are just flying. So,
Hey, Kim,
yeah.
really quick, I have to step out for a second here. This right here, you said, I heard Alicia said we have 10 votes. What are we voting on really quick?
So do you see on the screen, Daniel?
Yeah.
So we have the ones across. So we've talked about, you know, the program, if it's loans or grants, and then we've talked about some, you know, amounts needed, and we're going to kind of get into the next topic of, you know, based on AMI, do you need a higher percent of down payment? If you're, let's say, in the Portland metro area or high cost areas that we know of, is there a higher, you know, amount of DPA for that area versus some of our smaller rural communities who may not need as high amount of DPA as like in our high cost areas? And then we're going to talk a little bit about the other ones up top. So the RFA timelines again, and that's next time, you know, what does that look like?
Right.
Potential barriers, and then enhancements to the program as it exists today.
I see. So like for the guarantee program, if I think it'd be a grant, just click on the grant?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Perfect. I know Cheryl made a comment in reference to, you know, generational wealth and more sustainability of having, you know, the grant versus the lien on homes. Is there other thoughts around other ways to create generational wealth and maintaining sustainable homeownership?
If I might, I just went ahead and wrote this in as a comment. So the way we've structured our down payment assistance, if someone sells their home before satisfying the first mortgage, this down payment amount becomes due, but as soon as they've paid off their first, they retain 100% of the down payment assistance. And then they're also retaining all of the appreciation in their home. There are other approaches where it's shared of the DPA along certain benchmark points, but we have a very high repayment rate. We are expecting less than 15% of these down payment assistance liens to ever come due. And that seemed pretty reasonable to us from program administration.
Thank you. And I know in when we did partner engagement on our flex lending, we were talking about that as well. What does the down payment assistant loan look like in that lending arena, again, to create that generational wealth, appreciating a shorter time frame to have that loan forgiven so it does remain with the homeowner. So thank you. Any other thoughts just around this one? Because I think we're at a good stopping point to take like a quick, we're a little ahead of schedule, and my goal is not totally to keep you here till 5 if I don't need to, but I just want to make sure we get through everything, but I can also appreciate needing a little stretch break.
Kim, I just have one more like logistical question.
Please.
So are we, like I'm on this call from CASA and so is Rose. Is it, you know, we each vote individually or like one of us votes for CASA?
Nope, you each get to vote.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's a great question. Yep, no, we are wanting as much participation as we can, so with that, we take like a 10-minute break and resume? Let's see, we're at 2:40. How about we resume at 2:50? And we'll stop the recording, and that way everyone won't be missing anything. And we can just have a little break.
Okay, good.
That's great. Thanks, Kim.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks, Kim.
Oh, right. Well, let's resume. I hope everyone had a self-care moment. So we'll go ahead and resume. Thank you for the items in the chat. And Karen Sachs asked if she could ask a question or have time to have a quick discussion before we continue. So Karen, please.
Great, thanks, Kim. So I actually was just curious. I'm just seeing Senate Bill 79 for the first time just a couple minutes ago. And what I'm seeing in this is that Housing and Community Services is looking to adjust the HOPE statute to allow for a loan as opposed to the grant that has normally happened. And so I guess I'm just a little bit curious about opportunities for input into that and if this is the place or not. But I'm seeing in here in section 4 that funds from the homeownership assistance account must be, and the change is going to be used for grants or loans to individuals for down payment assistance, grants or loans to organizations that both sponsor and manage homeownership programs for households with income at or below area median income, and then a handful of other things. So is it the intention that there won't actually be, that OHCS will be providing down payment assistance directly to individuals and not going through community-based organizations, or can you kind of speak to what maybe the intent is on here and how we can provide some feedback?
Sure.
Thanks.
That is the intent, to put it in the statute, but it is not something that we are ready to address right now. Meaning, that probably didn't come out right. So we want it in the statute, so at some point down the road, if OHCS decides to keep the money internally, we would then have the opportunity to loan or grant it out. That is not where we're going today. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it answers my question, so I appreciate that. I think it would be great to be able to have maybe a partners call at some point about the impact of that to agencies and what that change effectively means for us as agencies doing this work.
Okay.
Thanks.
Of course. And the other thing that I want to bring up around that statute, we'll just kind of detour for a second, because a couple of you have brought it up, and we have brought it up for more further internal review, is the definition of AMI, how it's defined in the statute, is really causing barriers for the DPA funds. So we're bringing that up internally because we're not sure how that definition got in the statute last time.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. That change in there, I think, makes total sense, and I think is huge. So thank you.
And I'm not trying to sway from your question, but I guess what would be helpful, and I'm happy to get a meeting scheduled, is to let's look at our statute to see if there is some changes that potentially that maybe we can get through in this session. And I'm not trying to push anything through or anything like that, but I know we've been looking at a couple things internally, just like, how does, I'll just use social services are in there, and that's something we've never used HOPE funds for. And I'm not sure, like, when the statute was created, back in 2009, if there was thoughts around that particular segment of dollars. So okay. So Karen,
maybe
and everyone
can add it to, sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, maybe we can add it to our agenda for the next homeownership work group to talk about the legislation and kind of discuss it.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. I think we'll definitely try to hit it in February for folks on this call who are also on that one. But I think for folks who maybe aren't on that, it would be nice to have a further discussion, I think, initiated by OHCS as well.
Yep. Is there, because we are in legislative session and, well, we soon will be, is there a day that is better to look at scheduling this partner call? Like, is, like a Wednesday morning, a Tuesday afternoon? That may be too hard to predict at the moment, but if there's something that is better.
It's a great question. I don't know that I've seen or if there are committee dates and times yet, but I'm happy to check in with Allison and maybe send you some here are some conflicts, and then we can maybe schedule around that.
Okay.
Thanks.
And I can check with Nicole too if she has anything too that she might know of. So, okay, so we will look for that. Well, I'm just going to say probably early February, maybe mid-February, just because of where we are right now, and just trying to get something on the books in January may be a little difficult. Yeah, okay. And then time frame, do we think an hour do we need 2 hours?
I would say probably an hour is sufficient to at least start the conversation, especially if we can time it maybe right after the homeownership work group meeting. Then we'll have had some kind of time to run through our scattered thoughts at that point.
And so Karen, is that the 11th meeting, February 11th?
That sounds right.
This the second Thursday, which would be the Housing Alliance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you want me to plan the OHCS after that time?
I think that would be ideal.
Okay.
Thanks.
That just helps in trying to plan. Okay. Okay. We can do that. Perfect. Okay. Great. Okay. So we're moving on to number 5. I think this is really the other big piece of this conversation is down payment factors and the amounts of down payment, right? We know 15,000 isn't enough. But what is, if money was never an object, what would be the magic amount that we would need? But then the other thing that I, want to have some discussion around, if you are at 80% AMI, do you receive, I'm just going to say $100,000. And if you're at 100% AMI, are you at 50,000 or 80,000? Is there an amount based on AMI that may truly make that impact, right? I've had some conversations with Dana at the Portland Housing Bureau, and they're finding that a lot of home buyers in their northeast preference policy area are needing $100,000 to $150,000 in down payment because of the home prices and competing and everything. And so that's the reason why I'm, just kind of throwing out some different numbers. And so, we have the data earlier where we know where we are on housing cost burdens. Obviously, we know with rents increasing, it's harder and harder for our first-time home buyers to save, to have money for down payment. We know housing prices are going up. We also know there's an inventory shortage. So with that, thoughts around what that may look like. And then Alicia put the fund retro back up too. And so we can add more to that. And then I would just like to hear from the group on thoughts too.
This is Luis with Dev Northwest. I love the idea of being able to have a little bit of a higher AMI. We've done a couple of programs where we've had that be the case, and we've noticed the level of clients that we're able to serve when we just increment it a little bit is pretty significant. Not to say that the 80% doesn't need it, because we know that there's a big need, but oftentimes the barriers that we're coming across with is the loan amounts that a family who is in the 80% or lower doesn't really match up to what's available in our current communities for sale. And that creates a lot of challenges, where we also see a lot of families that are in that 100% AMI who are approved and have been in contract or are able to find homes that they can make offers on, but they just need a little bit of that extra help. So I love the concept of being able to bump it up a little bit, because we've worked with certain programs in the past where it allows for that and we see the impact, but yeah.
Luis, do you have a dollar amount? Just curious to what, I know you said a little bit, so, and I'm trying not to put you on the spot. I'm just curious of what that would look like. And it may be, obviously, it could be geographically determined as well.
When you mean dollar amount, are you talking about in assistance?
Yeah, so like right now, how we have Hope capped at 15,000.
Right.
So would it be, would our cap be 50,000 potentially at maybe 100% AMI and a different amount if you were at 80, or
Yeah.
would it be a flat increase no matter, if you were 80 or 100% AMI? Should we increase it to, everyone gets 30,000 or everyone gets 50,000?
Mm-hmm. I personally like simplicity, so I usually tend to lean more towards just kind of keeping things the same. In terms of like an amount, it would really depend on county and area, because we know that when you go north, it's a lot different than when I'm in Eugene, so it's a little bit harder to compare.
This is Susan at Community Action Team. I know that not everybody likes using formulas, but is there a way to incorporate, for instance, a percent of average affordable home price as the initial number to be determined, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000, and then step it as far as whether they're 100% AMI, 80% AMI, 60% AMI. So it's two components as to determining what they'd be eligible for. One is what's the cost of a house in that particular area, and that I think would make it equitable across all of Oregon communities, as opposed to saying top is 50,000, which is not going to touch something in the Bend area, but 50,000 in Tillamook is going to get you, a third of your house.
Okay, I like that. And Alicia is adding that to the fun retro too.
This is Katie at Proud Ground. In some of our grant programs, we like a debt to income ratio minimum to determine like the actual need of assistance. So, for example, if someone gets below like 30% debt to income ratio or something, maybe they don't need the full assistance amount, whereas someone that might have a higher DTI could use more. So that's one possibility. I think that would maybe level it out in different markets. So you would be obviously seeing maybe some higher requests in higher cost areas based on that. And so it would be somewhat connected to both income and housing costs.
it sounded to me like what, oh, I forgot who said it, but the thing that was just said before Katie was uh, like the two-tiered approach. So like one is using that, um, like the cost of housing. So like in Willie's presentation, like the median house price of, in Jackson County is different from the median house price in Multnomah County. So that's one layer. And then the other layer is like Katie's layer, which it was the, like how much money do you need? And if we could like combine those two things, that would be sweet. I think that's maybe what was stated earlier, if I'm not confused.
You're exactly correct. Perfect. And there's lots of comments in the chat agreeing with Katie's comments as well. So, and then Evanette shared a link in there in the chat too, just around generational wealth. The article talks about how to build and keep generational wealth. So the link is in the chat too.
Hi, this is Yvette from PCRI. I think that it should be raised anywhere from 60 to 75,000. I don't think that the AMI should make a difference as far as do you get the 50 or the 75,000, because we find that when people are over the 80% with the DPAL, they then have to buy a bigger house to be able to qualify for the same amount of money. And I don't think that that's fair. I mean, you can only afford what you can afford, and it's unfortunate that you happen to have a job that you're making, you're at over 80%. Now you have to buy another room, which adds another $40,000, $50,000 to the purchase price of your home. So I just think we should increase it and make it the same whether you're 80 or 100.
Very good point. Thank you. It goes back to the sustainability, right? We want to ensure that we're not setting someone into a higher priced home just so they can have, and I don't mean so they can have down payment when they really need to stay where they're comfortable and they feel that that is where they should be.
Hello, Kim. This is Itzel with Hacienda. I agree with Yvette. I am just going to speak about Hacienda clients. We are trying to layer as many programs as possible because they are needing between $70,000 and $80,000 to close the gap.
Okay.
Hi, this is John at Neighbor Impact. I'd like to point out as well, what we usually use our $15,000 max to work in conjunction with our revolving loan fund to establish a 20% down payment. What that does is it alleviates the client from having to pay for PMI, and you're almost, it's a wash. And instead of paying insurance every month, you're paying towards equity in your property and paying down your loan. Yes, we roll a 2% over lead lender rate, but it gives them the flexibility. And heck, I've had already someone who bought their first home back in October of last year has already refied and paid out and paid us off because of the market. So, it gives more flexibility to the buyers, and they're in a better position. So my point is, maybe a percentage of the sales price, not a fixed number, but based on up to 20%. And that's how my loan program is structured.
Thank you, John.
I was just going to type in the chat, but I'll just say it since there's a pause. I guess as I'm thinking down this road, I mean, I certainly, we are in full support of more funding per home buyer for sure. That's going to make a huge, huge difference. But when I think about that, then if we're pushing up our funding per buyer higher and higher, that would impact, I guess, my recommendation on how it's structured, whether it's a loan versus a grant. So I think they both, I mean, that's why they're right next to each other. All these factors go hand in hand, but it's something that we want to make sure that we're creating an opportunity for multiple households. That's it.
This is Susan Wagner. Can you hear me?
Yes, Susan.
Okay. The one thing that Kat did in the past with our self-help as well as with down payment assistance for traditional purchases is we had a forgivable loan. So, you know, like with shop dollars, it's a 10-year period where it's forgiven 10% a year until it's, you know, the lien is released in year 10 with $0, because what that does is that prevents someone from, for instance, buying a home, getting $60,000 or $70,000 down payment, turning around and selling it right away. And it does build their wealth in there over a 10-year period, and without having that money be used just for one household. If they end up selling in just, you know, a year or two or three, you are able to recapture a portion of that funding to be put back into a revolving loan fund if for some reason they end up selling sooner than the 10 years.
Okay.
Kim, I guess I would ask the question. This is Alicia.
Yeah, okay.
Making a comment saying that we go higher with the amount of our funds to the home buyers. Obviously, they need it, and I apologize. I don't know who spoke about indicating whether if we had a higher amount, then you had a different thought process, whether it was a loan or grant. I was wondering if you could elaborate that, and if there was an amount, I guess a tolerable amount that would be a grant, or a tolerable amount that at what point it would be a loan. Just thoughts around that, because it's true, the higher you get, then you start questioning, it makes more sense to have it be a loan versus a grant. So I just wanted to throw that out there because that was a good thought process, and I just wanted to get some more thoughts on that.
That was Katie at Proud Ground. I was speaking to it, and other people can chime in too. I'm thinking back to like way back, BHCD. Basically, they used to give out different funding amounts for different types of products. So it was like, at that time, I think it was like $35,000 per unit if it was going to be a grant. And then up to 70,000 if it was considered permanently affordable or something that was going to be benefiting more than one household. So I mean, I don't, you know, those numbers were way back when, but I think the idea of, you know, I mean, you know where I work, right? Proud Ground, we do permanent affordability. We are, like Diane said, you know, we support generational wealth building as well as permanent affordability. We think they can work hand in hand. But I do have a hard time thinking of, like, for example, $80,000 going into a purchase as a grant and helping one individual household, especially if there's not some intended timeline on which the home buyer needs to own the home or so on and so forth. I mean, that's great for that one individual home buyer, but, you know, if we had $80,000 to serve all of the households that need the money, then I'd be all for it, but we don't. And so we have to balance that with people that aren't getting the opportunity to get into the homes. So.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, is there others that have any conversation about that? Because it is a really good point. The higher we go, the less people we help. And you're right, if it's a grant, then it doesn't go on to the future, to the next person. There's no others that can be assisted. It would.
Hi. So from a lender's perspective, Go
I
ahead.
have to say I agree with Katie in that trying to recapture the larger amounts of money so that we can recycle those funds into more buyers down the road, I think is a good concept when we are talking about the larger subsidy amount.
Okay, that's great.
This is Suzanne from PCRI. I'm going to push back just a little bit on this because when you're working specifically with an African American population that already has multiple barriers that the white population doesn't have, if you don't have that opportunity to give this as a grant, what you're doing is, yes, you might be serving more people, but you're not serving that population that is having a more difficult time getting into homes. So I hear both sides, but I just want to make it clear that it's not always about how many you can serve. It's about who you're serving as well. And if you're able to serve 10 families versus 2 families, but those 10 families are all white families and those 2 families are African-American families, I think that as far as our statewide goals go and our societal goals go, we should consider looking at the African-American families that we would be serving with more dollars.
And I agree with that as well, Suzanne. And I think that, I think that all of this should have a layer, which I think we're all in support of serving the populations that need this the most. And so regardless of how it's structured, I think we will have that goal. I think that either way, I think we could help that population for sure. And that is something that's happening, I guess. At least at our agency, but I think that should be a goal of the program in general.
Yeah, and this is Josh, just to provide that lender's perspective. In a lot of scenarios that I've seen across the country, this is kind of a dilemma that a lot of agencies come across, and even more so at the state level, because sometimes if there's a higher interest rate, sometimes lenders or loan officers will target those borrowers to refinance and get some of those funds paid back sooner, or if there's no grant, if it's somehow tied to the rate, they'll more or less take advantage of the system. And having some sort of a 3-year, 5-year forgivable loan, not necessarily a repayable loan, but just a forgivable loan, at least creates that nobody's going to really be taking advantage of the product. And it could even be on a tiered structure of 20% a year forgiven, but it at least creates that sustainability where they're living in that house and they're not going to flip it 6 months later and go move to another state. Because that's always the concern as well, that some folks don't have the best intentions, because we've seen it, at least from a lender's perspective, where borrowers will go out there and there are some programs that were changed because of certain lenders targeting borrowers to refinance, and they're really taking advantage of the program. So that's something I would hate to see happen to Oregonians as well, is where we could be helping out more people and then someone turning around and taking advantage of the funds.
Great. More comments around that? Any other comments?
I just have a question to Suzanne's point. So, right. So if it's 80K, let's say, since the number was thrown out, or 70K, whatever, 80K. If it's 80K, that is in grant for Black families. How would we kind of can we just say that, right? Can we just say for, communities of color, it's grant, and for non-communities of color, it's half grant, half loan? Can we do that? Is that can we do that is the question, I guess.
Well, we have to be really, really careful. And I know in the lending world, they have to be really, really careful as well. I think in some of the research that we've been doing on our flex lending, we are using data elements that represent communities of color. And so one of our flex lending DPA programs will be focused on communities of color based on the data elements. It is open to anyone if they met those data elements, right? So you're not only, I mean, if you're a white person and you meet 2 of the 4 or whatever we end up with, you could still receive the highest amount of down payment assistance in our flex lending, but the data elements really are focused on communities of color, and that way we aren't, you know, officially targeting anyone, because we have to be extremely careful in that. Now, Veo, that's not to say that these particular funds we can have, you know, established set-asides that for communities of color, or maybe it's certain neighborhoods or things like that, that we could say, yeah, they are a grant and we are, you know, building generational wealth, and maybe it's forgiven over time. So I think those are all, you know, discussion items that as we continue to move forward that we can have. And of course, you know, we'll always make sure we come back around, and then we have, you know, our executive team and our Housing Stability Council, and then DOJ for any, you know, final things for approval. So I don't want to say no. You know?
No, I got it. That was perfect. I was, you know, I wasn't making a judgment call on it. I was just kind of wondering.
Yeah.
So then, based on that, and other comments, could we do like a, you know, what those 4, you know, you have to meet the 2 out of 4, you know, criteria. Could we do like, it could be like the grant, and then depending on like how many of those criteria, it's tiered more to, or it's like loan, and depending on like how many of those criteria you meet, makes a larger proportion of that grant, up to like 100% of it grant. Is that possible? Or did someone say that already? I don't know.
No, but those were other, I mean, I think that's other programmatic elements that we could definitely look at.
Okay, cool. I hope that made sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I think that, you know, it's kind of simple in terms that grants versus loans. It's a question of sustainability, and you're not going to have any money coming back in to help the next person if you just give it all away. So there has to be a delicate balance in providing these loans so that your program can continue to exist.
Right.
And the flip side of that coin is that if the statewide housing plan has a goal of increasing homeownership for BIPOC and other historically marginalized communities, that we need to make the investments in those families to get them sustainably into homeownership. And oftentimes it's going to be a higher dollar amount compared to their white counterparts.
Very, very, Karen, that's exactly right. And the data that Willie showed today supports that statement. And again, why we're having this conversation and what that looks like to attain our goals that are in our statewide housing plan. And then, I mean, is that, you know, additional asks from the legislature as well for additional down payment dollars. From the Racial Equities Task Force, that was a huge topic of discussion as well, of having increased down payment funds for communities of color. And those funds look very different, meaning we need more funds to bridge the gap and to actually move the dial in that. So several conversations around that at the task force. Shannon.
Yeah, I would just like to bring into this conversation. Again, I'm balancing multiple thoughts here and listening actively. I do think it would be great if some HOPE dollars at some point could be made available for capacity building around developing home ownership units that are affordable. Because I think we need more players at the table, and we need more culturally specific partners active in this work. And those of us who are doing this work have growth to do too. And I think we need both. I think we need both more down payment assistance for units that already exist, and we need more high quality, single story, oftentimes energy efficient, entry level units in every part of the state. And we can, throwing down payment assistance on an existing high price unit in a high price market is one solution, but it just needs to not be the only solution, I think.
So along with that, if you want to add some, what you're finding and what you're seeing as far as barriers onto our thing, if you want to add some of those things, because that would be helpful to have those for us to take away. For anyone, please use the Easy Retro and add what you see as barriers.
And Shannon, I know Emma Shea has had conversations with some of our culturally specific organizations who would like to get into homeownership development, but they don't have the staffing today to do that, but they would like to, right? And they do need some capacity funding to get there, or extensive, training or other, mechanisms. And I think you're right. We all are learning in that. And so how do we all collectively expand that? And, what does affordable homeownership development look like? And, hopefully, that's the other conversation on the other $10 million that is in the governor's budget for homeownership development. But I know we've talked a lot about the connecting walls, like through the garage, or the connecting walls of like townhomes. And I know there are some in Salem on Lancaster in this little area of land, but they are so, they're cute. When I drove by, I'm like, what are those? And they were all for sale. And it's like, oh my gosh. If you didn't want a big yard or anything, they're like perfect. And they're just, so I think that those are other options that we need to look at for opportunities. So Scott and I have been meeting with a nonprofit developer who does homeownership. So we've just been trying to figure out other opportunities and, different models and what looks good and what is replicable, right? So, yeah. I know other state, I think it's Washington. I want to say it's Washington, that if there is like any surplus land, that they have the opportunity, Shannon, you're nodding, I think it's Washington, that they have the opportunity to, I don't know if it's necessarily donate it, but they have the opportunity either at a reduced cost or something that they can do for nonprofits to develop affordable housing on. So. Okay. Other thoughts just around DPA dollar amounts or I mean, we had a really, I think some really good discussions and some other options that we have not talked about internally. So I appreciate that. Okay, let's move on to number 6, which is just RFA timelines and options. And this is just the next time going forward. I know we've had discussions over the last several years. It'd be nice if our solicitation came out like in conjunction with Portland Housing Bureau or other funding sources. And so that's kind of the part of this conversation. And Alicia's gonna go ahead and lead this conversation.
So I guess we want to talk about the option. I know layering is a huge piece for everyone, because obviously we know the amount that Oregon Housing offers is not sufficient for most home buyers. And so we're layering our funds with quite a few. I've seen a lot of different sources, which amazes me, all the different funding that's out there, but it's amazing to me how much you guys have to know about all the different funding sources. So I applaud all of you for all of that, knowing all the resources that are available to you to help the homeowner or the home buyer. So we can't control always when our RFAs get posted, because once we get our program created, we work with our procurement department and they go through and make sure we have all key elements in our RFA and our grant agreement, and then we submit that to Department of Justice for legal sufficiency. So I think most of you probably know the process. So, but we want to see what we can do if there are specific times of the year that makes more sense for the home buying, whether it be because there's other funding out there, or maybe it's a better time of the year for building, is like in a habitat situation, or other things like that. So just want to get some ideas. Enhancements to our program is another thought, and different options that are out there. We haven't obviously made any decisions until we're with this meeting. We wanted to get some ideas, but if there are specifics about the timelines and options of the RFA, things that you wanted to talk about, and as well add to the Easy Retro to for us for takeaways to make sure that we capture what your thoughts are. So with that, I just will leave it open, and if you guys have any thoughts around any of those topics.
Go ahead, Shannon. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Karen.
You're fine.
Just one quick wish, wish more than guidance. Of course, it would be optimal if the DPA could roll out on a consistent schedule from biennium to biennium, and perfect universe that we would not run out of funding before the end of the biennium that I think we're going to this allocation. And what happens when there's a gap is that we need to enter into this like re-education period with our, the affiliates we partner with. And where I see the biggest hurdle is specifically, and this was true for repairs as well, with regard to veteran outreach, because I'll try to say this as best I can. The veterans who are going to benefit from this down payment assistance are, in a sense, a little harder to reach than just any veteran. So there's a large population of veterans looking to become homeowners for whom the VA program is going to get them plenty far enough and everywhere they need to go. And then there are maybe some veterans who have some additional hurdles, would be one way to say it, but also we need to find them. And because they have additional hurdles, they may not be as linked in with veteran support services. So it like takes a while in each community for us to connect. That was true for the repair program as well, that it was like the third group of veterans you get to, and like now we know who needs these repairs, who qualifies for this program, not the first and second. And it's always a little painful. And I know there are things especially in this time, right, outside of all of our control. But when there's a timing gap in a program, then it's like we lose all of that outreach headway, and we have to, it feels like, unfortunately, start from scratch when a program does come back online.
Yeah, this is Karen. I would agree with a lot of what Shannon just talked about. The other question that I would have around frequency is more around the city-specific or the county-specific CET funds, and about basically if there's a way to do supplemental or periodic releases of those, so they're not held for a full 2-year period. Like, for instance, I think on one of Willie's slides, there was an asterisk by Eugene, right? Eugene just missed the deadline in order to start getting things. And so I think what we're hearing from elected officials and folks in Eugene is, so where, like, are you utilizing that? Is that money out the door yet? You know, or is that impacting homeowners here? And that, I think messaging gets a little hard. And so I would say that my wish and my plea would be to see if we could do something around, I think, more frequent CET releases.
Karen, we are having have a meeting with procurement for that as well.
That's awesome. I saw both of your heads start to nod, so I felt like I had hit a question that you had too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And so, and really, it's kind of looking. I'll expand on that. So when we originally received CET, we just said we're going to make it just like HOPE. Right, so we didn't have to create another program because OHCS doesn't receive any we can't take any admin funds on this. And so we just said, we'll just make it with HOPE, right? And it follows all the same HOPE requirements. But one of the things Alicia and I have been talking about is in certain areas of CET, and I'm going to use Portland, and it could probably be, you know, across the board, is, does it make sense for the CET money to maybe have a higher dollar limit too, right? So if we didn't, let's say if we didn't change anything, would it make sense to have CET be higher so we can at least get it all utilized in the areas where it's coming from? You know, would that be helpful? And then, you know, is there a way to maybe change it? Can we like, the community action agencies, right, where the money comes in and it goes right back out. So like, if we get CET money, can it go right back out to the entities who are providing down payment services in those jurisdictions? So, I mean, those are some things I think we just have to talk to procurement on what that looks like.
Yeah, I think those are all great ideas and things to think about. I love the idea of utilizing the CET funds in a very flexible way, right? I completely understand the like initial goal of getting them out in line with HOPE as that was coming out, but seeing them as that the flexible source that I think the intent is, I think would be great.
Can I ask a question? So when we had, I guess, our last conversation around down payment, it was every 2 years we wanted a solicitation to come out. Does that still make sense to have it every 2 years? I know it's a nightmare to apply for solicitations. We are having lots of conversations internally about what does it look like if you are a partner who gets all your money out the door, right? Maybe in the next round, do you just get to give us a little mini application and, you know, we grant you more money? Do you still have to complete the long solicitation, right? So when we're having some conversations internally, what that looks like, because we know we're not the only funding source that you are all applying to, right? There's many other entities that you are applying to receive funds for. So, you know, if on a biennium it's best, we're, you know, happy to do that. And again, looking for, is that more in January? Is it, you know, I've always heard, you know, it's obviously great to have the money out for the summer, when in theory that's when most people are buying homes. But now I think it doesn't matter what time of year it is, right? If you find a home and everything, the stars align, boom, it's yours, right? So
Yeah, I think, Kim, from the Dev Northwest perspective, that's kind of where we're at, right? I think and that might be why some of the folks on the phone are a little bit quiet, is that home buying season is year round at this point. It is more about the stars aligning for folks, the resources, the inventory, and the process moving forward. So I don't know that personally we at Dev Northwest would have a strong thought one way or another about exactly when the RFP and the funding would have to come out. I think to Shannon's point earlier, it's more about that consistency and trying to avoid the gaps in availability.
I have a question about the time frame, how long we have our programs. This current program is an 18-month program, partly because we wanted to get the money out as soon as possible and start working on, well, if there's some revamps to the program, we wanted to get that done so that we're not continuing to have the same program roll out. That's not as effective as we had hoped, or that you as our partner would hope for it to be as effective, which is, this meeting was scheduled for April last year, Kim. And then everything happened. And then we thought, okay, September works, but September didn't work either. So we shortened the time frame of the program so that we could go through this meeting, figure out, are we doing the right thing? Does the program make sense? Does everything about the program make sense? Or do we need to make some changes? And then we could cut the timeline on the current program and get a program that maybe is better fits for everyone's needs rolling out. So is an 18-month time frame program work well? 2 years and I know Kim talked about possibly having a mini application after you've completed your program and start a new one without the RFP or RFA process. So just a question about how long a program could run, because we can't run them simultaneously. We can't have two different DPA programs open at the same time based on the procurement laws.
This is Suzanne. This is the first year we're doing this size of DPA. And it's pretty interesting how quickly you can go through the amount of money that you have. And we will definitely have a large gap where we will not have any DPA available for people. And so, yeah, shorter would be better. And of course, more money would be better too.
Always more money, right?
Right. And I was even thinking, we're seeing a lot of money being put into the system for like the CARES Act. And I know we're about to see more as soon as we have a change of administration. And if there's any way to sort of speed that up so we don't have to wait an additional, year before, we can have access to that type of funding as well, that would be great.
I do have a note in the chat here that says not due in early January. So I'm assuming, Dave, you're saying not have the RFP open, that you would be completing it during the holidays and submit it in January.
Right. And I don't think you ever suggested you were going to do that, but don't have it due January 1st or 10th or something. That'd be bad.
I'm sorry. After New Year's Eve, you have to submit your RFA.
I think one of the issues as well is the fear of the unknown. So a lot of times we'll go for additional funding and not really know the amount that we're going to end up getting and how to budget for that and what other resources we need to reach out to capitalize our programs. So maybe, based on exemplary status or whatnot, it could be an automatic redraw and at this certain date being maybe when you spend out and you just get refunded. That way we're better prepared to budget and staff for, what kind of production we can get out.
Yeah, Alicia, your point that you just made actually is really interesting to me. And I feel like probably the first time I well, might not be the first time I heard it, so I apologize, but that you can't have two DPA app or cycles, whatever, my word is going to be wrong, open at the same time. And so I'm a little bit wondering, is there, if you're looking at maybe a 12-month timeline, would it be that like every 12 months there is an RFA, and that if you are an agency that has utilized all your funds and expended all your funds up to that point, you're able to apply. If you're not, then you're able to apply at the next available RFA cycle once that has been utilized. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's actually making sense to everyone. Yeah, I'm just trying to think, do you kind of like, almost have it as like a rolling cycle, and depending on if you've extended that as an agency, then you get to jump in for more funds. And if you haven't, you're still utilizing that for a full 18 months or a 24-month period.
So my understanding is that if we open up an RFA during a current open program, so like right now, if I were to do another RFA for down payment assistance, I could only offer it to areas that currently do not offer that program. So for whatever county I'm funding to, I could open it up right today, but I couldn't open it up to the areas that people are currently serving in.
Oh, okay. Then.
So it's kind of tricky because, so if you were to deplete all of your funds, and let's say you had 4 counties that no one else was serving, then I could open up an RFA for those particular counties only, or any other county that didn't have any funding sources. So we could open, yeah, I know it's kind of weird. It's kind I don't know if you remember years ago, we opened up an RFA for the homeownership centers for the areas that we didn't have any service to, in Harney County and Lincoln County. I believe it was just those 3. And because we didn't have areas, we were able to open up the RFA for those counties. If we had had somebody in those areas, we could not have done that. So, yeah, so it's kind of weird, but we could try, hopefully, to open up. And I think Shannon brought that up. We could have an RFA open and applied for, scored, and grant agreements out so that when the current one expired, the new one started. So the new one expires the end of this year. So then we could go through the entire process of an RFA, scoring grant agreements to be effective January 1 of next year. So we could do that, but we just couldn't have 2 different programs running at the same time. Did I?
No, I appreciate your explanation. It is an imperfect system, but how you explain it makes sense. So I get that, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I make sure I'm saying it correctly.
But I think we are trying to explore with procurement, though, kind of if it's a mini application, Karen, exactly what you're saying, right? You've expended your money and, and you've performed, you've done, you met all your goals, and then you have that proven performance measure. Is there a way to make it simpler? And then for those who aren't meeting, or, for many reasons, what does that look like? Is that then a full solicitation? So we're working with our procurement just to ensure what we can do. And then the other key is ensuring that in the solicitation, we say whatever that may be, right? So we can do that then, but yeah.
If you are looking at performance goals, one of the things, since we are trying to increase the number of BIPOC homeowners, we might consider adding that as one of the goals. Did you reach, 50% of your DPA was going to BIPOC community, then that might be a good thing.
You are correct. Yes. So, yeah. Yeah. Other thoughts around this? So we really didn't hear there was a perfect time for a solicitation. What I heard really is it's that consistency so we're not running out of funds, if at all possible, right? In a perfect world, and if we, had a calendar and we backed everything up and everything would be out, that's what we can plan for. So, okay. I want to just touch on some thoughts around, because Shannon brought it up, and I think it's a very valid concern about reaching our veterans, and is there, we have Gus, who is our veterans integrator here at Oregon Housing. And so usually when we say, hey, we've got partners who, need help getting funds out to veterans, usually it's always, work with the CSVO, the Certified Veterans Officer in every county, which is great. But I also hear Shannon saying that some of the veterans that need our services may not connect with the CSVO, and how do we do that outreach? And I guess my other question is then how do we at Oregon Housing help in that outreach, or connecting other veterans service providers who may also be working with harder to serve veterans, to ensure that they are aware of our programs. And I'm thinking, like, if they're going into like our community action agencies, I know they're very busy, and most of them all know about our programs, but maybe they don't. I'm just, how do we help facilitate or bring, if it's getting a meeting together or something, not that I'm trying to create more meetings for everyone, but if there's ways that Oregon Housing can help, bring communities together around veterans, that we can obviously get them more resources. I want to, have some dialogue around that too.
We have found that working with veterans takes a lot more time, and some of it is because they're on the timeline of the actual government, who, like, for instance, people that are waiting for disability to come in, well, it's going to take them 5 years before they find out, and then all of a sudden they get a $25,000 check or something like that. It's sort of a really difficult. I think also finding veterans of color is particularly difficult. We're finding that it's word of mouth within the community is how we're finding people, but there's also, they're more likely to get up and move. Like, hey, I'm moving to Texas, or I'm going to Atlanta. It's like, we've been working with you for 3 years. So the other thing that I would say for vets specifically is if we could increase the size of the down payment assistance, that would make a difference. Yeah, they often have barriers that we would not even think about. Yeah, especially around disability.
I just want to echo, this is Katie, I just want to echo Suzanne on that. What I find myself wanting to do is layer the veteran specific funding with like the CET or with the regular DPA to make it like a $30,000. That would be great.
I love that idea with the increasing the veteran amount. That makes a lot of sense.
This is Susie with Community Connection in LeGrand. I'm finding it difficult. I mean, we've done pretty extensive outreach. Even I've talked to every county VSO. We have a National Guard unit here. Spoke with the commander and VFW posters, ask the few vets that I have worked with, because us vets are clannish, so word of mouth really is a good way. But kind of what I'm seeing is like both severe ends of the spectrum. So no income, it's kind of hard to go from homeless to mortgage ready, and then over income. So, and not by a lot over income, just enough to knock them out. And then the asset issue, when, you know, they have been waiting to get their disability or whatever, and then they get that $30,000, $40,000 check. So then they're over, you know, they don't qualify asset wise.
So is the asset barrier something that's in your program? Because well, I guess, because if they had money in the bank, we're not counting that. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding where the asset, asset piece is the barrier.
If the money is set aside to purchase a home, we don't count that as an asset.
Okay.
But you know, so when I've dealt with a couple of disabled vet that are getting disability, but they're also working. So they have, you know, maybe a 60% disability, that's income. Or then there's the National Guardsman that has a full-time job and then gets his, you know, when they go out, he gets income from the National Guard also. So it just bumps them up over the income limit.
Okay.
One of the asset things is the IDA. If we're trying to get somebody into an IDA as well, which almost always we have to have an IDA and down payment assistance in order to make a home affordable. And there is an asset limit specifically on the IDA.
Okay.
And one of the other problems that we have is often with veterans, they will go for a really long period of time, basically having no income or having very, very limited income. And then when they do get that, you know, 60% disability, all of a sudden they are over income, but they still have years of like credit issues because they haven't been able to pay their bills. So their barriers really are much more significant than we see in the general population.
Okay. Okay.
Is it possible to do brain's locking up on me. Like, you count different sources of income differently, right? So like to Suzanne's point and Susie's point, right? Like some of those sources of income, well, like I guess Susie's like that is like a regular source of income, like it comes on a schedule. But for those that don't, like the IDA, that's like an injection of income that isn't going to happen again. Is it possible to like not count those types of sources of income?
You know, that's a great question. And I know the Racial Disparities Task Force, we talked a lot about IDAs and increasing dollars specifically for IDAs for homeownership. But but we didn't talk into like barriers and so, okay. But maybe that's a good point. If it's, you know, a one-time source of funding, we don't count it. But I mean,
or if you could potentially not include their disability pay or, you know, a percentage of that. You know, I think about like people who are foster parents, that money doesn't go towards, you know, having them over income. So maybe there would be a way to have something like that with disability specifically where that doesn't hurt them.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Just a thought.
Okay. No, it's a great point. Okay. Well, and I think too, just in thinking forward and more discussions just around, you know, IDA understanding potential barriers in the IDA program. I mean, it's a fabulous program, don't get me wrong, right? But if there's income limits and asset limits, and there are certain barriers there, and so you can't get IDA, but you can have, you know what I mean? I'm trying to think if we're looking at really some other programs or how we can truly effectively layer different programs, but yet one has more barriers than the other. Okay.
Yeah, I've been advocating for a while to change the asset level requirements on an IDA. The way it's structured right now, it is especially difficult for people who are older because they're going to have more assets, especially retirement assets. $60,000 in retirement assets is not a lot of money, and I'll have a senior I would like to get into a home repair IDA and I cannot, or a home ownership IDA and I cannot because they have too many assets.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. I think, and those are conversations we need to have internally as well, right? So that's great. Okay. It's 4 o'clock. I think we should do, is there anything else on the RFA timelines or other options we needed to talk about?
I don't think so. I can put the agenda back up.
Was there any other topics that anyone thought we would have talked about, you would like to talk about today?
Kim, this is Debbie.
Hi, Debbie.
I just have a question. I'm a little bit confused because there's a lot of emphasis on putting people into homes that are sort of disadvantaged, the BIPOC community and whatever. And then we have the veterans. Is there a reason why they're two separate programs and they're not all combined?
Well, as far as HOPE, we just have the set aside for veterans funds that 25% of our funds have to be utilized for veterans. And that's in all the document recording fee, right? So that's within HOPE, it's with our affordable rental housing. You know, those dollars have to be used for, you know, multifamily housing for veterans. And then the money that goes to our housing stabilization in the EHA program, that money has to be spent specifically on veterans. So it's actually in the statute that was written that way when we added that. So that's why we have it separate. We track it separately for all funds coming in, our admin expenses, everything we track is by veterans, and then why you see HOPE General and then HOPE Veterans, because we track everything separately.
Okay, well, that explains it. I did not understand that. I think it would just really be helpful if somehow the income limit for veterans could be adjusted, because like Susie explained, they're either at one end of the spectrum or the other. We're not getting anybody in between. Okay. And we don't just know who else to canvass. I mean, I've been on the radio. I mean, we just don't know. And it was interesting to hear if other agencies are having that same problem.
Okay. Okay. No, and this is why I know, because we've been hearing from different partners, some have been having, you know, more difficulties than others serving veterans. And I just figured since we had a little bit of time and, you know, Shannon started the conversation around veterans, that I wanted, you know, to have some more conversations around this. And again, why I appreciate these conversations is that we can hear the barriers and then we need to take it back internally and have the conversations internally. And I think, you know, again, this is one we can do some cross divisional work and just see if the other two sections are having trouble serving veterans. I think the affordable rental group probably doesn't, because they can go down to, you know, much lower income levels. But again, if we need to make those changes, I think that's definitely a policy conversation that we certainly can have when, as needed. So.
This is Yvette with PCRI. I was hoping, and maybe I just have missed a call or two, that you guys would be discussing the RFA for the home ownership centers.
I can tell you, I can give you all an update. So Alicia is working on it with procurement on a weekly basis. And as soon as it is done in procurement, it will go to DOJ. And we are hopeful that DOJ will have a pretty quick turnaround time. I think our hope is that by the end of this month, it will be at DOJ for review. And as soon as they are done with it, it will be posted. So. And I'm just, you guys all know me, I'm pretty honest. The reason that this is taking longer, it's a total, we will be taking all of our programs and looking at all of them and redesigning a lot of them. And that is part of our statewide housing plan, through all of our goals, part of our equity racial justice work, looking at barriers that we have in existing programs, are the conversations we've had with partners about barriers and how do we reduce those in our solicitations and program delivery. So it's just, and we've been looking at other states for best practices around a lot of our programs and what they have utilized. So we are hoping that we have a much better product when it's all done. It's just taking a lot longer. So, but we're working on it. And I know PCRI, you guys have been patient and you always keep bringing it up. And I appreciate that too, but we are working on it because we do know of some other partners that would like the opportunity to be a homeownership center as well. So.
And Kim, just to share that our procurement department and DOJ are extremely busy with getting the CARES Act funds out. So they're responsible for getting those agreements and RFAs and things posted and out the door. So their time, they have high priorities in addition to our projects as well. So they're working as fast as they can.
Yeah. But great, but always ask, don't be afraid to ask. That's great. And our procurement staff is pretty small. I think there's 5. I think there's 5 procurement staff that cover the agency. So they're very busy. And no excuse, it's just, right, it is workflow and everything coming in from the CARES Act and or the governor's emergency funds are taking priority to get those funds out the door. So, but yeah. Any other thoughts before I say goodbye to everyone? Because I don't keep people just to keep people. So a few takeaways that I have is we will post Willie's PowerPoint to our technical advisory page on the website. We'll post the recording as well. I will work to get a meeting scheduled to review Senate Bill 79. Karen, I didn't even know what the number was, so thank you for that. And we'll look to get that meeting scheduled after the February 11th Housing Alliance meeting. I think that are my takeaways. We will leave the fund retro up until tomorrow at 5, Alicia? Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
So, and we can leave it up a little bit this afternoon, probably till 4:30 today if anyone wanted to stay on and do that. Cheryl, is that okay? Okay. Oh, actually, Alicia and Willie are the co-hosts, aren't they? So.
You just, as long as you have the link to the Easy Retro, you can go back in there and just click on and grab the link if you still have the link, and just go in there and add to it until tomorrow.
Okay. Great. Any other questions or comments from anyone? I just want to thank everyone for taking your time this afternoon. I know long Zoom meetings, I think, have been our norm. Sometimes, you know, it's not as fun as I wish we could all be in person, because I do miss seeing everyone in person, but I understand why we are where we are right now. And someday we're all going to be able to come in a room and have, you know, sticky notes on a board. So, Alicia, Willie, any final comments, thoughts?
Just want to thank everyone for attending, and again, I'll reiterate, if you have any questions about the data I provided or want any additional questions answered, I do my best to try to do that for you. But yeah, thanks for letting me sit in on this.
And thank you, Willie, for doing that for us. We appreciate it. And thank you, everybody. Appreciate all of the input and shares with a good discussion today. We have a lot of work to do.
And again, as always, if there's comments that you think about tomorrow, you wake up in the middle of the night. I hope y'all don't do that, but make sure you send us an email. We're happy to have further suggestions if you're thinking of something. We appreciate that as well. So with that, enjoy. Hopefully it's still sunny where you all are. I know it is for me. So enjoy a little bit of the daylight, since days are a little bit longer than they used to be. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Willie.
Bye.